More programs, more pressure without new headcount. That's the reality many L&D teams are facing today. But what happens when you stop trying to scale by heroics or adding more people and look at more towards the structure and the partnerships and performance focused ecosystems? If you've ever felt like your team is running on fumes, this conversation is for you. Today, we're joined by JD Dillon, and we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a discussion, talking about the problem of scale and why scaling isn't the problem. How we try to scale generally is. JD, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm happy to be a problem for you, David.
You are always a great problem for me to have, and I welcome you to the discussion.
Thanks for having me.
So, let's talk a little bit about this problem of scale. Why are so many teams hitting the wall when they try to scale their learning programs with limited resources? Now, let's start with that point of the pain. You've got a lot of experience dealing with frontline people and people who are trying to apply with their learning in sessions. Why do you think so many L&D teams struggle to scale when their workload isn't sustainable?
I think at the core, if you look at just the tenets or common practices and tactics around education at large, it's very programmatic in nature. I think that's what a lot of people are born from. It's whether you have formal training and experience in corporate learning and development, or you're more like me and you just came out of the operational side of the world and turned into a person whose job became trying to help other people do their best. And if you look at the tools that are commonly available in the space, the way a lot of technology is built, a lot of it leans towards content and programs and structure and the idea that we teach people how to do the job separate from the job. And there's a place and time for that. And that's where the struggle often begins, both in terms of our ability to scale, to chase down the priority problems of the day, and to influence stakeholders when it comes to getting that available time for people to focus on their development. So I think the legacy of the concept of learning and development is wrapped around program. And there's only so much you can do when it comes to applying a programmatic approach to helping people do their job, especially in a landscape that's dominated by speed and the desire to do more with less and the desire to invest in places that clearly deliver monetized top line value to the organization, which is often not directly attributable to longer term focuses around things like learning and development.
In your career, you've worked with a lot of frontline organizations, a lot of organizations with intense operational environments. And it's difficult to scale in a lot of those environments. What are some of the patterns that you've seen in your work that kind of give people an idea that their teams are starting to hit capacity and scale is going to become a problem?
How often do stakeholders go around you to solve a problem is a generally good indicator that you're struggling to keep pace because the simple fact is that the problems don't stop, right? The operation doesn't slow down. We're not going to shut down a function or a location or anything that's driving the business forward in order for any other function, support team or otherwise, to try to keep up. And I'm pretty sure everyone out there who's worked in a support function, inclusive of HR, learning and development, has had that experience where an operations team chooses another route, brings in their own solution, buys yet another learning management system because there are only so many of you and so many resources and so many problems that you can address at a given time. And even if you are going after the biggest challenges, the top priorities for the organization, there's a stakeholder out there, a team out there that needs help. And through no fault of your own, they're being left behind because of the way that we've traditionally gone after or partnered in order to help organizations solve problems. So I think beyond what I think are a little bit more clear cut symptoms of overload and being stretched thin, people working nights and weekends, people just being burned out, not being capable of doing their best work, the feedback you get with regards to how people feel about their ability to do the job, responsiveness in terms of stakeholders, how responsive and agile do they feel that you are in terms of meeting their changing needs. But I think one of those symbols or signals to look for is are other solutions being sought out? Because maybe people are looking at you as not being capable of being the partner that they're looking for right now, just based on the nature of how the organization is functioning, not necessarily based on anything that you have done or haven't done.
So when L&D teams get stuck in this point where they're starting to hit capacity, I think for a number of reasons, a lot of the legacy systems that you've touched on, the the natural reaction is we're going to just work harder. We're going to we're going to work the weekends. We're going to do what needs to be done to bridge that gap. And, we talk about things like burnout. I think sometimes those become cliches because we say it so easily that the power of what that word is loses its weight. What are some of the other real costs that an organization has when teams keep pushing forward to just try to bridge the gap through their own heroics without getting that relief? What are some of the real impacts that on the team, on the organization, on the business outcomes? What are some of the impacts you can see when people just try to bridge the gap through just working harder?
One, I don't think anyone's doing their best work in this particular situation. So we're leaving something on the table when it comes to the potential of driving outcomes. Two, I think we're fracturing relationships when we're not necessarily giving our best or delivering our best outcome. And it's not just the team that's doing the work that's necessarily stretched thin, right? We're asking a lot of the entire organization to be able to pull off a lot of what I would call unnatural acts when it comes to just trying to meet the deadline, to keep up with the next initiative, to hit the launch timing, whatever those different factors may be. Um, and we end up losing good people, right? People can only go so long and so hard when it comes to doing more with less. And I think we have a do more with less mandate without do more with less systems and infrastructure in order to keep up with that. I do think it is a solvable challenge. I think we can change the way that we look at providing value to organizations. And I think it's something that, again, all of us have run into. And I remember back in my time period running training for contact center operations, I just realized there were only so many Captivate modules that I could build and so many instructor led trainings that my team could facilitate. There was no way that even with more resources, I was going to be able to keep up with what stakeholders were throwing at me. And it was a kind of a rough awakening to the fact that I had to change the way I thought about what I did because I wasn't going to be able to get the rest of the organization to shift their mindset overnight. I had to start with me. And I often find that some of the hardest mindsets to shift are actually our peer group, the people that we work directly with. Because in a lot of cases, people wrap their identity and their value around the work they have historically done. If you've been a classroom trainer for your entire career and we have a conversation about doing things differently and maybe doing less of the thing that you commonly do, I'm not just shifting strategy, I might be challenging your value.
Hmm.
So we have to have a conversation that starts within teams like learning and development to start thinking, what's the shift from program to system look like? How do we get on the same page with what solutions can look like that scale more effectively? And then how do we get the rest of the organization on that page as well? Because if we think differently, it doesn't matter. We need everyone that we support and everyone that we work with and partner with to be on that same page as well. So I think the organization's not going to stop for us to have this conversation. And especially as work shifts through both the emergence of AI enabled technology, but also shifts in priorities and changes in how organizations want work to be done and who is doing that work. These conversations are already being had. We have to have those conversations now and participate in that shift in the workplace rather than kind of holding on to legacy practices and having the change be something that's done to us rather than something we participate in.
It's a great way to look at it. I like the fact that you've positioned it as a mindset shift that people have to adapt to, in addition to just changing structures. And I think that's a great segue to the next part of our discussion. So when we come back, we're going to talk about what happens when teams stop trying to do it all by themselves and what changes when they find new ways to scale with support. Stick with us.
Quick question. Do you actually know your L&D team's capacity? Most teams don't. They just feel the pressure. The capacity scorecard fixes that. 12 questions, 3 minutes, and boom, instant clarity on where your team's strong and where the risks really are. If you're running learning programs, don't guess your capacity. Measure it. Take the scorecard and see your results. Tap the link below and start now. It's fast, it's easy, and honestly, you'll be glad you did.
So, JD, let's shift now towards running on empty to running with purpose and scaling in a better, more informed manner. You talk a lot about ecosystems and enablement in the work that you do. How does that mindset change the way teams approach scaling their efforts?
Words like enablement and ecosystem were an incredible unlock for me when I started to run into that wall and realization of the fact that I can only move so fast and I can only address so many challenges despite my best intention. When we talk about what we do using words like learning or skill development or terms that I think anchor to that more legacy programmatic view of what an L&D function is, I find we not only limit the types of solutions that we can apply to help address a problem, we limit the mindset that the organization carries with regards to the value the function can provide. I am a big fan of the word enablement as opposed to using learning and development or even training, which I'm a big fan of the word training as well. I don't think we use the word training nearly as much as we should in this industry for strange reasons. Um, the word enablement for me unlocks the idea of to address whatever this challenge is, I'm going to use every tool, tactic, and technology available to me. It's not just about the systems that I control or the programs that I can develop. It almost gives me permission to look more broadly
Mhm.
and to be less focused on, I'm going to help someone learn how to do something, and more about there's a problem that we need to address in the organization that somehow relates to someone's ability to execute, to do the job, to solve the problem, to complete the task. Let's figure out the best and most efficient way to do that. And I'll harken back to something Clark Quinn said to me a long time ago. It's like, why build a course when a job aid will do it?
Mhm.
It's a simple flip of a mindset to say, my job is not to help you learn. My job is to help you do your job. And I'm going to do whatever I can to help you do that. And that includes breaking outside of the silo of my own function and my own tool set and using whatever I can to help you. And along the way, that helps us start to bring to life a lot of the other terms and concepts we enjoy talking about. Things like in the flow of work starts to become more and more possible when it's no longer just about what I can wrap my arms around and the solutions I traditionally own or control. It just unlocks a much larger conversation, a much larger toolkit. And it's the beginning of that mindset shift to say, learning and development isn't about just helping people learn. It's about helping people do the job. And there's a lot of different things I can do when it comes to helping people perform more effectively.
So one of the things that organizations can struggle with, and as they go down this path, is sometimes we have to do what's expected of us today to earn the right to do different things tomorrow. And in that in between period, when we're working towards some of these other types of solutions, we have a problem scaling some of the initiatives of the current space. And one of the ways that organizations successfully solve for that is by finding a partner who can help with that, by just getting more hands involved, someone who has outsourced the extra hands in there. And that can be a really successful way for a small team to scale their efforts beyond just there. And they see they're able to do more, they're able to get more volume and more productivity from their efforts by adapting to more of an outsourcing model. I'm curious from your experience, where have you seen organizations succeed scaling their efforts through outsourcing as a solution?
Again, I think it starts with that mindset to acknowledge the fact that maybe you've worked in this organization for a long, long time. You have a great understanding of what you do here, how this business runs, and what can help people be successful here. But are you comfortable asking the question about what you don't know? Like, what do I not know that could actually help me do this more effectively and deliver greater value? So oftentimes, again, no fault of our own, we get locked inside the bubble of our organization, especially when we work there a really long time. We're very good at what we do and we understand how this organization works. We're not necessarily spending a ton of time outside that bubble, understanding how other organizations are successful, how practices and technologies and tools are evolving in ways that if we had the time and capacity to look outside, we'd be able to apply those concepts and drive our own practices forward. So reaching outside the organization on a regular basis is critical to advancing our own practices. The right partners can help you do that and bring that level of innovation and capability to bear in support of your own goals and initiatives. So I think it goes beyond just the concept of capacity. It's not just about adding hands. It's about bringing in a level of capability and expertise that's really hard to continue to evolve internally because you have problems and you have stakeholders and you have people knocking on your door in ways that make it really hard. It's one of the worst jokes in learning and development, how little time learning and development people spend on their own learning and development. because we're acting in service of others. I always say that we're not Batman. We're Alfred. We're the guy in the chair trying to make sure the hero can be as successful as possible. Alfred doesn't have a lot of time to dedicate to himself because he's focused on Batman. That's a very long Batman analogy and or metaphor. Hopefully it made some sense. We'll talk about Wile E. Coyote later. But I think that's the real value. And again, looking at it as less I'm outsourcing tasks and more about I'm leveraging partnerships and I'm building relationships and I'm creating an extension of my team. And I think that's what great partners are able to do. It's not just I have a checkbox list of services and I can complete certain tasks and I just give you a templated output. I'm willing to understand how your team functions, what your organization prioritizes, the culture of the organizations that I'm partnering with. And I can act as an extension of your team to the right level, because I'm not a part of the team, but I'm an extension of what you're bringing to bear in terms of value. And as someone who's outsourcing the work, I can then make a strategic decision around what are the right things to bring in a partner to handle? What are the right things for my team to handle based on the nature of the work, the nature of my stakeholders, resources and budget, what have you. But I think if you think of it less as outsourcing tasks and more as bringing in informed partners who can not only help me do the work, but can help drive my capability forward in ways that are really hard to do yourself. When again, you're trying to do more with less, and it becomes more and more about checking the boxes and getting the work done than advancing the practices. And that's kind of where you get overwhelmed, how you fall behind. That's where the story gets really challenging.
So I'm going to put my own story into the next question. I know the first time that I outsourced something when I was an internal person, I struggled with it because I kind of felt like I was going to give up control of the quality of the delivery of. I struggled with the decision to do it because I felt like I was giving up too much control. In hindsight, it wound up being one of the best things I ever did to scale our team. But what do you say to leaders who are worried about giving up ownership through outsourcing?
Michael Jordan wasn't on the Bulls by himself. We remember him in a particular way. He's goated for a reason. But he needed the four other guys and particular people in order to be as successful as he was and to be the GOAT conversation. You're not necessarily maybe you are Michael Jordan of learning and development. I don't know what criteria there is for that particular status. I don't think we have rings as a profession. Maybe something we should look into.
We should work on it.
That said, it is not I think again, it comes back to that mindset. We are not the hero of our own story. And the faster we can let go of that idea that the more that we do signals the value that we provide, we're in a better position to actually drive outcomes that I think resonate more effectively because we can wrap meaningful measurement around our outcomes, whether that be our ability to help solve more problems and be more efficient with our resources, or to drive meaningful metrics forward for the business. And again, through no fault of our own, I've worked on teams that had this exact set of metrics. Our value is measured by output, right? How many hours of training on average did an employee in this organization experience? How many programs did I deliver on? How many boxes did I check? And so often we have an ownership mentality that is wrapped again around our identity and our value. I think bringing in partners doesn't necessarily remove our ownership. We're still the person that's directly working with the stakeholders. We're expanding our capability and our team through the process. And we have to do it, like I said, with people who are going to align to our standards, not just deliver templated, off-the-shelf, generic work. Because the outcome, the solution, the content, the program, whatever that solution might be, it's still going to reflect on us, no matter who was hands in the work. So we have to go into this conversation with standards, with an aligned partner who's willing to do the work, and again, act as an extension of what we can provide, not something that people will notice as an entirely different quality from what we've been able to deliver in the past. But again, for me, that major unlock was the day that I realized we love using terms like sage on the stage to guide on the side. We like rhyming things. I like silly metaphors. When I realized that the further into the background that I can fade, and the more systems and connections that I can facilitate, and the less often people have to reference the fact that I was the one who helped, the more value I started to deliver. Quick example. I was big into knowledge sharing practices, still am. Implemented a giant knowledge sharing platform in one organization. And all I wanted, my entire goal, we built tens of thousands of assets and wiki pages and content items. But all I really wanted was for someone in the Phoenix location, I don't know why I picked these cities, someone in the Phoenix location to have a problem. And then someone in the Orlando location that they've never met before to solve that problem with them. And me to have nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Because I put the systems in place. I created the conditions by which those people could connect and help one another. And the day it happened, I took a screenshot of it. I sent that exchange of information to my boss with one line. It just said, it's working. And I think that moment unlocked something in me in terms of the perspective I bring to the work, where it's not about how many problems I can solve. It's about how many problems I can help other people solve. I think when it comes to this conversation about expanding our resources, bringing in partners, and the function of outsourcing, I think it's that mindset where we're doing what's necessary to help people do their best and deliver value to the organization. When I talk about an ecosystem or enablement as our function, that includes our ability to go out and get the help that we're going to need. Because like I said, the operation doesn't slow down. The problems don't stop coming. If we're going to deliver value as work changes, we have to change the way we approach that. And even when it comes to you're seeing more and more articles right now around AI and the fact that what slows down AI has nothing to do with technology. It's not even necessarily about data. It's about people. And it's about the mindset. And it's about our ability to shift how people think about the work that they do. That's a lot harder than implementing any system or technology.
I love what you're describing there, and one of the things that I'm thinking as I was listening to you is having the conversation around it and getting the value proposition for ourselves is one thing. But you mentioned the example of sending the message to the boss, showing how it was working, because we need their buy-in to get really a seismic shift. We need their buy-in to get them to approve shifting our models and doing things different. So I love that example of that. And I want to focus on that value proposition for our final segment. We're going to talk about what it takes to move from just talking about these changes to really putting it into action, and how to make the case with stakeholders to change this in your organizations. Stay with us.
Can I ask you something? How confident are you that your L&D organization can keep absorbing more demand without risking quality, timelines, or your people? On the surface, things often look fine. Programs are launching, calendars are full, delivery keeps moving. But most leaders don't actually have a clear view of where the real bottlenecks are forming across design, delivery, and operations. And that's the risk. Most teams don't realize they're nearing capacity until something slips. A launch gets delayed. Quality starts to dip. People begin to burn out. By the time those signals are visible, the system is already under strain. So we built a way to see it earlier. It's called the Capacity Scorecard. In just a few minutes, the scorecard gives you a clear picture of where your organization is holding up and where pressure may already be building. You'll see where you're solid and where risks are hiding, and the things you may have felt intuitively but haven't been able to measure. The scorecard gives you clarity, not assumptions, real insight into your current capacity so you can make informed decisions about what comes next. And if you want help acting on what the scorecard shows, that's where InSync training steps in. We've got facilitators, producers, designers, and entire teams ready to take the load off and help you scale without stretching your people thin. So, ready to find out where you stand? Take the Capacity Scorecard, see your results, and get a clear view of your team's current capacity. It's quick, it's easy, and it might be exactly the clarity you've been looking for. Click the link below.
Welcome back. For our final segment, I want to talk about how we get buy-in, build the case for outsourcing and scaling in different ways, and designing for capacity without compromising the quality. So JD, let's start with a question in that regard. You've helped a lot of teams move from being overwhelmed to being aligned in terms of what they're doing. What's usually the first step that helps make the shift we've been talking about?
Fixing something. Very rarely have I been successful walking into a senior management meeting with a strategy and a PowerPoint deck and saying, imagine a world. We're going to evolve from a place where we're asking people to step away from work to complete check the box training exercises to embedding a scalable support ecosystem inside the way work is done every day. People have a really hard time seeing that change and feeling what it's like and it not feeling hard or disruptive or expensive, what have you. I'm much more successful when I go after it from, there's still a plan. There's always a plan. You always have to have the strategy in mind because when something works, you have to be ready to scale it. So I used to say, even if I was trying to do something with 500 employees, I was making 10,000 person decisions every time because I knew if I was successful, that's where I was heading. But the fastest route to change for me has always been solving small but meaningful problems, not necessarily going after the big and complex thing right away, but showing that if we do something differently, if we apply our resources in a certain way, or if we take a more systems approach to solving a problem, it can have the impact that we're looking for. And I can build champions and advocates along the way. Because in an organization, no one wants to be me. They don't necessarily want to be the learning and development person. They don't necessarily want to have a conversation about deep and meaningful learning and development topics. They're not watching this show right now. They have their own expertise and their own priorities and their own accountability. Great. I need to demonstrate that I can do something differently and help them achieve their goals, whether it's checking a compliance in a regulatory box or it's driving better customer satisfaction, greater sales, improved safety, whatever the outcome that the stakeholder cares about might be. So for me, it's always been picking the right problems to demonstrate what I'm capable of or a new approach or a new mindset and combining that with the right stakeholder or the right champion. And that comes down to strategic influence. It's not always about the biggest shiny object or the biggest challenge or the biggest team or the biggest function. It's not even about the biggest ROI. It's can you help the right team, the right stakeholder solve the right problem so they start to look differently in your direction. And they quickly realize you're not the learning and development function. You're a team that's going to help me solve problems that I care about. What else can you do? And then you can leverage their voice in support of other stakeholders thinking differently. Or when you go to ask someone to try something different or adopt a new perspective or a new approach, you can bring that evidence with you. Because again, stakeholders necessarily want to be you, and they may look at you in a particular way today, especially if you're a learning and development function that's been heavily programmatic. People keep asking for a 45-minute course that covers the following bullet points. And if that's what you've been asked to churn out for a long period of time, and then you suddenly ask people to think differently, even if the concepts make sense, they may have put you in a box. So you're going to need to build an influencing program and champions that you can bring with you to advocate for this new idea. And the other thing I'll recommend is it's not just about having the most senior person as an advocate. I've seen it be a change be hugely successful when it's the frontline workforce that's on your side, right? When it's the right combination of champions that you're bringing with you. So you can add their voices to your own strategy and use that to change people's minds and get them to open the door so you can then solve the next problem, and start to make slowly but accelerating over time that larger shift in approach. So to rewind all the way back to the beginning, find the right problems to solve to build advocates for a shift in approach. But in doing so, have scale in mind the entire time, because when it works, other people are going to ask for help, and you need to be ready to be able to deal with those larger audiences and challenges.
So what does that look like in practice? So, because I understand what you're saying, and I've done that in my own work. Finding those champions is huge, but you still have to convince that champion to allow you to do something different. And how do you tell that story internally so that especially if you need help, like if part of the story is we want to outsource, we want to bring in someone who can help us do this, so that you're telling a story that is focused on the results, not just the I need help and budget to do this. We tend to be seen through this lens of a cost center that is just a necessary delivery system. How do you shift that conversation so that you're talking about the value of something like outsourcing and shifting an approach rather than just the ask for the budget?
That's where I come back to the idea of, is there a small but meaningful problem that's not going to have a ton of red tape wrapped around it? That's going to have a stakeholder that you either maybe have an existing relationship with, someone that's been an advocate for you in the past, something that's just not going to turn a lot of heads if you're going to try something different. Because when we try to suddenly introduce new tools, tactics, technologies, and systems in ways that are going to be highly visible, highly complex, require lots of sign off, significant budgetary investment, that's where people just get locked down and just want to move on to the next thing, right? Or there's what was wrong with the thing that you were doing before? The checkbox mentality bleeds right back in because it's a lot easier than, oh, I have a really great idea. And I believe, because I'm the expert, that this is going to work out better for us. Is there a way that you can solve something small for a stakeholder that's more pliable, more flexible, or more bought in already, that is not extremely expensive, but gives you evidence of impact that shows that if we do more things this way, this is going to help us go down that path? And usually there's something there, right? A problem that's not going to have a ton of red tape around it, that if things don't go perfectly well, is not going to have a huge issue. It's not safety or compliance or regulatory related. Is not going to be a break the bank type of an investment. And generally, I find that most stakeholders are not opposed to more help, especially if it doesn't get in their way or have a significant cost to them. So again, when you take a look at your organization, the stakeholders that are going to play a major influencing role in helping more people think differently, how well do you understand their world? Are there problems that they're running up against that are inside of your wheelhouse, especially with a new approach or solution? And can you raise your hand and offer to help, to show that you can do something differently and make an impact, without having to chase the big project, the big budget, the first time out? And then the other thing I would suggest is bringing evidence in from outside the organization that something has an impact. So often people put, again, people in a box. And sometimes you just need someone from outside the organization to come in and say the exact same thing that you've been trying to advocate for. And suddenly people are willing to be open to that idea because that's an external expert that brings in some type of evidence or some type of background that people are willing to embrace, even though, again, they're advocating for the same thing you've said. So is that a case study? Is that, if you're working with an outsourcing partner, are they able to come in and help you tell that story, demonstrate or show work that they've done for organizations that maybe aren't in the exact same space that you're in, or trying to address the same problems that you're working on, but are maybe from organizations that your stakeholders respect? That's another thing that I found to be particularly powerful. It's not always about, if you work in grocery, bringing an example from a grocer. That's often helpful. But sometimes your stakeholders have a particular reverence for another brand or another organization. And if you're able to say, hey, this approach or this partner has worked in those organizations or has shown to have impact within that type of a business, sometimes people's heads turn in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So I think that all kind of wraps together to say it's coming up with an influencing strategy, not just thinking that you can come up with the best possible solution and the best possible approach to solving a problem and expecting people to say, well, you're the experts, you're the function that does that. Of course, we're going to head in that direction. No, it's an exercise in influence to say, what's the right way to get people to look differently in my direction? And then when that happens, I have to be ready to deliver because I might not get a second chance.
So as I'm listening, one common thought that I've heard over the years keeps coming back into my head is we're talking to people about doing something different, whether it's asking for additional resources through outsourcing or some other thing. People have an expectation of what L&D does, right, wrong, or indifferent. That if there's truth to that checkbox mentality in a lot of cultures, that this is what training does because it's always what they've done, and we're trying to shift that mentality. But if some leaders struggle with that conversation of trying to do something different, especially if it requires additional resources, because they feel like they've failed the expectation that people have. They can't deliver on it. They can't scale it. They need something different. And there's that ownership of failure based on the legacy. What advice would you have for anyone who's struggling with that element of the equation?
This might be a slightly different way to think about this because we love having the seat at the table conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fan of the seat at the table conversation. First, I believe that your function is somehow represented in decision-making conversations because you tier up into the organization to someone who is involved in some way. I don't think that's the route to influence and the route to change because we've been talking about it for a long time. And I liken it to a restaurant. If you think about your favorite restaurant and what the people who work there do really well and the experience that you have, I am willing to bet that the servers at your favorite restaurant are exceptionally good at taking orders. They're very, very good at turning tables really quickly when they need to. If you're just looking to get in and out of that operation and not necessarily have an amazing guest experience, they're able to deliver. They can deliver the nuts and bolts extremely well. And then they build on top of that. They've earned the trust. They've built that relationship with you in order to deliver that exceptional next level experience. When a server comes to your table and they've dropped the tray of water on the way and people are raising their hands, asking for help, they're clearly falling behind, sweating, in the weeds, if you will. Is that the server that you're going to ask for dining recommendations? Are you going to ask for them, what's your favorite dessert here? Or are you just going to try to get out of there as fast as you can because this person's struggling for whatever reason? And then you look at the other server. That person's just on it. They had water to the table before you even sat down. If you're a regular, they know what you're going to order already. Maybe they've brought that out too. They're just very good. That's the person you're going to ask for recommendations. That's the person you're going to trust. They're a partner in this experience with you. It's a very long metaphor that I'm using once again in this conversation, but that's more of how I look at it is when it comes to shifting our mindset and approach. That's why I think it's so important for us to start to make that shift ourselves from a programmatic approach to helping people do their jobs to more of a systems approach that we're able to move faster, be more agile, and scale with the organization and chase down more problems in partnership with the people that we're trying to help. Because we can use those systems to become very good at checking boxes, very good at delivering on the things that we maybe know aren't the best answer, aren't the best solution. But we can use those as opportunities to start to change the way people think about us, that people trust us, that they know we're going to deliver, that we know we're going to be on time and under budget because we're very good at what we do. And then use that relationship and use that trust to start exposing people to new ideas. Sometimes it took me months to years to get stakeholders to look at me differently. Because again, had different relationships, different amounts of trust, different people, different priorities. They were focused on different things. Looked at me in a particular way. Maybe sometimes I have to check the box. I have to deliver the 45-minute long e-learning because that's what they asked for. But along the way, can I expose you to what the value of a digital assistant can be as part of this program? Can I show you how shared knowledge, resources, and reinforcement are going to help you drive a better outcome? But I'm still going to do the thing that you're asking me for, and I'm going to be very good at it. I think that's a stronger route. May take a little bit more time. It's not as, I think, magical as thinking that we can shift people's mindsets with a flourish, right? Acting more like consultants. Whenever people ask about or talk about the idea of shifting to kind of from order takers to performance partners and that type of a concept, my retort is, did they ask for that?
Mm-hmm.
Are they looking for that right now? I believe that they're going to get value from that shift. But I think it's going to take more than wishful thinking and kind of advancing our own practices to get there. I think the best route to where we're trying to go in delivering more value and being seen as partners is being exceptionally good as order takers and then building quickly off of that trust and relationship so we can offer new solutions, bring new partners into the conversation, and show that there is value to be had if we do different things to help people perform better in their roles every day. So I want to go through the storm rather than around it, because I think we've struggled to go around it for an exceptional period of time. And there is value, especially regulations aren't going away, right? Compliance isn't going away. You've worked in highly regulated industries.
Mm-hmm.
There's value in being very good in execution and then building a reputation for additional capabilities on top of that.
Absolutely. So I've really enjoyed our conversation. I want to end on a slightly practical note, more practical note, because what we're describing throughout this entire conversation, it's a journey. This is not something that you just flip a switch and it happens. It's a journey. It is a cultural change that gets attached to it. And anytime, I always feel like when I'm speaking to organizations and I'm talking about some sort of a mindset or cultural shift, and they focus on the endpoint, it can feel overwhelming, the idea of getting there, all the work that's in there. So for anyone who might be watching this or listening to this conversation who's already feeling stretched thin and they're struggling and they feel like they're overwhelmed, which could be a lot of people in 2026, what's one small thing that they can do this week to start reclaiming capacity and the ability to scale where they might feel overwhelmed today?
Find Tori. What if I just ended there?
That would be an interesting end, but say more.
Tori was the name of a gentleman in a previous organization who worked in a frontline role. He was very good at his job. He was not the organization's favorite person, largely because he pushed. He asked questions. He's kind of a pain when it comes to management. If you ask management for the model employee, they were not going to give me Tori. But Tori was important to me when I was on this journey of trying to scale as a learning and support function, as an enablement function, in a way that went beyond traditional programs, classroom, what have you. When I found Tori, it was the beginning of my search for the champions I could activate across the organization that could become natural extensions of my ability to help people perform. Tori wasn't a member of my team. I didn't bring him in any way, but I knew he knew. I knew he knew how to solve problems, and I knew he was motivated to help other people too. He was the example of that employee. Everyone has that employee somewhere in the organization that builds like the worst support materials you've ever seen, has no design skills, but puts together meaningful information with context that makes it more useful, more valuable than anything a learning and development function is doing, and just deploys it in a very unapproved, informal way across the team and is very helpful, is the go-to person, is the person that's always there to help. Find one of those. You might already know this person. You might work with them as a subject matter expert all the time. But how do you activate Tori in a way that helps you start to scale what you're able to do and starts to prove the point that it's not always about what solutions I can provide, what content I can develop. And it's the door to open, it's opening the door to moving from a focus on content to a focus on connection. Because once I found Tori, I started to give Tori keys to the system. Right? He started to become a contributor. I didn't just go to him and ask him for his opinion and perspective, then use his insight to build resources. I unlocked him and said, you can contribute directly. You can author content. I'll help you. I'll train you. I'll show you how to build resources in a way that's more valuable to people, that it matches the structure and the format of what we're trying to do. But can you go out there and find one champion that's already motivated, that already has know-how, already has trust and relationships within the operation, and start to think about how can you activate them as part of your enablement ecosystem? And then find the next one, and then find the next one. Because once I got kind of down this path, I found 250 people across an organization of more than 10,000 people. It was those 250 people that scaled what my team could do. I had 15 people, but I had 250 other people that were playing very specific roles in the way that we were finally able to kind of go after more challenges, help the organization move at the pace that they were trying to move, and I could focus my resources, my team, our expertise in the right areas because I had all of these other champions activated. That takes time. So my recommendation is find one and think about how can you activate Tori as a champion that's going to help you move that much faster, help you get people the help that they need to solve a problem today that much more efficiently, and then start to build from there. So find Tori.
All right. Well, everyone's on the lookout for Tori now. I appreciate that. It's a great
Bonus points if their name is Tori.
It would be. I
Let's
feel
make
like
it a thing.
you should make your next movie Finding Tori.
We'll try to make an abbreviation. So TORI, we'll figure out what that stands for in the context of this conversation. Make it an anagram. Trademark.
Yeah, the trademark is the most important part. There
The Tori method. Become a whole thing.
JD, I always enjoy talking to you, but one of the things I have to say I love talking to you most about is you are truly passionate about what we're talking about here. This is not something that you do. This is something that is very much who you are. And I think that's what connects people to you. I know how to find you. I know a lot of people do, but for anyone who might not be as familiar with your work, I know you're always giving back, and it's one of the things I appreciate. What's the best way to find you, and tell us some of the other things you're working on? Is that a book?
I was wondering if anyone was going to think it was graphically added to the shot. So you can find me at jddillon.com. Everything I do, all of my work is right there. That includes my first book, The Modern Learning Ecosystem. Goes into a lot of the things we talked about today, including influencing strategy, as well as how to adopt a systems approach to enablement in the workplace. So that's in this book right here. My next book is also available on the website, comes out May 5th of this year, the Frontline Enablement Playbook. So if you support frontline or deskless workers, lack of a better term, it's 3 pounds of insight from people, or it's how much the book weighs, 3 pounds, it's over 600 pages. Just lots of real world stories about how we can help frontline employees execute in service of driving outcomes for our organization. So that's coming out on May 5th. And I'm also about to launch a newsletter called Enabled, which is focused on the idea of bringing together all of the people in the conversation we had today. The L&D team, the HR team, the communications team, our operations partners. Let's have one conversation about how we can help people do their best work in service of driving the outcomes we're trying to achieve as an organization. So you can subscribe to Enabled. That's also available over at jddillon.com, as well as my speaking schedule. And if there's any way I can help, feel free to reach out. Like you said, I'm a big fan of Alfred. So, do they have Alfred action figures? They should definitely have Alfred in multiple outfits in addition to Batman.
I agree. Totally agree. Well, I will add one additional point of reference. JD is very active on LinkedIn. If you're not already following him on LinkedIn, you should. He shares some great stuff there, and he's always responsive to people who reach out. So I want to thank you for everything that you do for our industry. You're a great source of growth for us. And thank you for joining us for the podcast here today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, David. Always great to see you. And to everyone out there who's watching, thanks for hanging out the whole time, and thanks for everything that you do.
And to our listeners, if today's conversation hit home for you, don't miss our upcoming webinar on January 29th at 2 p.m. It's called When Scaling Hurts, Why L&D Teams Burn Out, and How to Fix It. You'll hear more stories about teams who have shifted their model, got real results, and found sustainable ways to scale. And if you're already feeling that pressure, InSync Training offers short consultations to explore what relief could look like, meeting you where you are with solutions that fix your current reality. So reserve your seat for the webinar now at insynctraining.com/webinar. And as always, subscribe to Modern Learning on the Air for more conversations that meet L&D where it's really happening. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning into Modern Learning on the Air. For all your training and services needs, visit us at insynctraining.com. And don't forget to sign up for our monthly webinars, where we cover key topics and trends in the learning and development space. Until next time, keep learning and keep growing.